Hi everyone, so my name is Adriana Santiago and I'm going to be presenting on conflict theory. So the main idea of conflict theory is that it focuses on the explanation of orderly as well as disorderly societal processes. And when we look at it through the family, it explains how or why stability and instability occur. When we look at the Viewmaster on iLearn, it shows a description of conflict theory as the scarce resources leads to conflict between the haves and the have-nots. And we saw that with the two little boys fighting over the toy. I have here 6 pictures that describe the 6 assumptions of this theory. The first is the nature of humans is that they are self-oriented. So this picture here is where a world revolves around the person. So an individual will do whatever it takes to get a piece of the cake and are in competition for the things that they want. The second one is societies operate under scarce resources. Perpetual scarcity of resources equals perpetual confrontations or conflict. Dealing with family crisis, so the third assumption is group dynamics are different in families than in groups. In the North and South video, we saw where the father dealing with the wife who was dying and the children who were starving, his conflict was much more different from the conflict of the union as a whole. The demand of resources is going to be much more interpersonal strain than it would be in a group of workers, employees, or interest groups. The fourth one here is that conflict is a confrontation over a control of scarce resources. So here I have a picture of the 2 chess pieces facing each other. This conflict or confrontation is either internal or external. Internal originating from the inside and external from the outside of the social system. An example is my husband and I recently went through a flood, and that was an external conflict, whereas if we're critical of each other, that's something that's internal. The other assumption is that conflict can be classified, and the 2 classifications is macro and micro. So I used to be a sociology major, and then I changed my majors, but we often talked about conflict theory. It's one of the foundational theories that we use to explain societies. We talked about the inequalities between rich and poor, black and white, male versus female, etc. Micro is within the family. It's what we as marriage and family majors are looking at more, and what elements bring conflict within the family. The last one is a checkbox of a happy face because it shows that conflict has positive aspects. We can look at mortality as a major conflict, one of the biggest conflicts that we're going to confront with a variety of scarce resources. But we know as Latter-day Saints the eternal goal and the positive that comes from coming to this world and going through those confrontations. Now that we understand some of the assumptions, we can go through the concepts. So here I have conflict, conflict management, conflict resolution, and competition. So conflict is the direct confrontation between groups or individuals over scarce resources. Conflict management does not get rid of the conflict, it only makes sure it doesn't escalate. That's usually through negotiation and bargaining, which we'll talk about later. Conflict resolution is where the parties no longer see the issue as a competition for scarce resources, which is different from consensus, which we'll talk about later as well. Competition is realizing that in conflict you are going back and forth between winning and losing. Negotiation and bargaining is the exchange process designed to reach a collective agreement on a disputed issue. This can be understood as a lawyer and a judge trying to find the best time or consequence for a defendant. They're going back and forth in a disputed issue on trying to agree on something. Consensus, as I mentioned before, is the stable state in society or families where all parties see the same way. This is like the prophets reaching unanimity in church discussion. They all agree, and not only agree, but they see the same way. Threats and promises is understood as threats are messages that communicate the delivery of punishment, whereas promises are messages that communicate delivery of something positive. Power is the ability to control the direction or course of actions of others. This can be in a positive or negative way. Assertion and aggression. Assertion is acting in a way that affirms one's rights and position, not at the expense of others. Aggression is behavioral use of power to get others to behave to one's own advantage. Next, we'll see a video that highlights very well the example of conflict theory. So here in this video, we see a lot. We see the scarcity of resources, the coconuts, the fish. We even learn later that Moana's father, he has the scarce resource of his daughter, and he even shows that through power and aggression when he picks her up, throws her down, and walks away. We also see the positive aspects of this if you guys have seen the movie later, where things become better and Moana finds who she is and the people have their food and they end up becoming those voyagers that their descendants once, or that their ancestors once were. There are a lot of connections in this video and in the entire movie that relate to conflict theory and how it's different from groups and individuals or within the family. We also see the critiques of this theory. So analyzes families in destructive negative terms. A lot of people see conflict theory as fairly negative instead of positive and constructive terms. It does not propose how families can improve. So a lot of theorists may believe that theorists may see that this doesn't help build families. And then it describes situations where families are not happy and safe. It rather shows the difficult negative side. So I wanted to share some resources. Here are some links. I can't go through all of them, but a lot of times conflict can become contention. But it's important to remember the assumption that conflict can have positive aspects, because ultimately without conflict we wouldn't be able to progress. And so sometimes those conflicts are necessary, but we don't want it to become contention. And so here are the resources, if you want to look them up, that have really good notes from the church, from Psychology Today, and other resources that if you're interested, you can look at to help you in any conflict that you might be facing. This last quote I wanted to read from the textbook. It says, "All humans engage in conflict situations, and understanding the management of conflict will lead to an understanding of stability and instability in marriage and family." And that's what I have for you guys today. Thanks.